I used to be exactly where you are, sitting for hours with my books, rereading the same pages, highlighting almost everything, and still forgetting nearly 70% of it by the next day. It's frustrating, but here's what I eventually realized. It wasn't your fault. Your brain is designed to filter out information it doesn't think is important. And if you keep forgetting, it usually means you've been using the wrong method. I'm Japanese. I used to be just a regular student, and now I'm working full time. But one thing that surprises people is how much I can still remember, from over 2,000 kanji characters to complex skills I use in my job. That didn't come from studying more than everyone else. It came from being taught the right methods by people before me. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll walk you through everything I learned so you can start using it today. Before we go into the methods, there's one truth you need to understand. Your brain doesn't reward time. It rewards signals. If your study method doesn't send a strong enough signal, your brain simply won't keep the information. That's why rereading feels easy but disappears quickly. It's low effort, so your brain assumes it's low value. In neuroscience, there's something called the forgetting curve. Within 24 hours, most of what you learned starts fading. But this isn't a flaw. It's actually a feature. Your brain is constantly asking one question: is this worth keeping? And everything I'm about to show you is designed to answer that question with a clear yes. The first method I was taught is the Feynman technique, and this is where real understanding begins. The rule is simple. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it deeply. When I studied, I didn't just read a concept and move on. I would close the book and explain it out loud as if I were teaching someone with no background at all. Sometimes I imagine explaining it to a younger version of myself. If I caught myself using complicated words or getting stuck, that was my signal to go back and simplify. One small habit that helped me was writing explanations in plain language, almost like telling a story. For example, instead of memorizing a definition, I would say, "This works because of this," which leads to that. As Richard Feynman once said, "What I cannot create, I do not understand." When you can rebuild an idea from scratch in your own words, your brain stops treating it as borrowed information and starts treating it as yours. Once you truly understand something, the next step is strengthening your ability to recall it. This is where active recall comes in. Most people study by exposing themselves to information again and again, but memory doesn't work that way. Memory is built through retrieval. When I was preparing for exams, I would often study without looking at my notes at all. I would take a blank sheet and challenge myself to reconstruct everything from memory. At first, it felt like failure because I couldn't remember much. But over time, I noticed something interesting. The more I struggled to recall, the easier it became later. It's like lifting weights. The strain is what creates growth. A simple way to apply this is to turn headings into questions. Instead of reading a chapter titled Photosynthesis, you ask yourself, how does a plant turn light into energy? And then try to answer it without looking. That small shift turns passive reading into active training. Now here's where most people make a mistake. They try to do too much at once. That's why the Kumon method is so effective. It focuses on small, controlled progress. When I was younger, my assignments were intentionally simple, sometimes even easier than what I thought I could handle. But the goal wasn't difficulty, it was consistency. By mastering small steps every day, I built a strong foundation without feeling overwhelmed. This approach removes resistance. Instead of thinking, I have to study for hours, you think, I just need to complete this one small task. Over time, those small tasks stack up. When I later read Atomic Habits by James Clear, it reinforced what I had already experienced. Tiny improvements don't look impressive in the moment, but they compound in ways you don't notice until much later. But even with understanding and consistency, there's still one problem left: time. Without the right timing, you will forget. This is where spaced repetition becomes powerful. Instead of reviewing randomly, you review strategically. When I studied kanji, I didn't wait until I forgot completely. I reviewed just as my memory started to weaken. There's a moment where something feels slightly unclear. Not gone, but fading. That's the perfect time to review. It strengthens the memory far more than reviewing when it's still fresh. One way I applied this was by keeping a simple review schedule. New material today, quick review tomorrow, another review a few days later, then again after a week. Each time took less effort, but the memory became more stable. It's like reinforcing a path in the forest. The more often you walk it at the right time, the clearer it becomes. Now let's talk about sustainability, because none of this matters if you burn out. This is where Kaizen changes everything. Instead of chasing big results, you focus on small daily improvement. I used to think progress required long, intense sessions, but what actually worked was consistency at a manageable level. Even on busy days, I would do a short cycle. 2 minutes of recall, 2 minutes of review, 2 minutes of focused practice. That's it. The key idea behind Kaizen is simple. You don't need to win the day, you just need to not break the chain. And over time, that chain becomes your advantage. There's a saying I always remembered: slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. When you remove friction, progress becomes automatic. Finally, none of these methods work without focus. This is where Zanshin comes in. It's not just about concentrating harder, it's about creating conditions where focus happens naturally. When I studied, I didn't rely on motivation. I relied on environment and ritual. I had a specific place where I studied, and I used the same setup every time. Before starting, I would take a short pause, sometimes just a deep breath, to signal the beginning of a focused session. Over time, my brain began to associate that environment with deep work. Distractions became easier to ignore, not because I forced myself, but because I had trained the context. Focus is not something you chase, it's something you design. If you look back at the last time you truly mastered something, whether it was a game, a skill, or a subject, you didn't just consume information. You interacted with it, you tested yourself, you adjusted, you repeated the process. That's what real learning looks like. So now the choice is yours. You can continue with methods that feel productive but don't last, or you can switch to methods that actually work with your brain. You don't need to use everything at once. Just pick one and start today. Because the difference between those who improve and those who stay stuck is not knowledge, it's action. And the real question is, what are you going to do next?